1.5 million more workers filed for unemployment insurance last week. This brings the total to 45 million. 45 million. An additional 1.5 million workers filed for unemployment insurance for the first time last week, a drop of just 58,000 claims from the week before, despite reopening efforts nationwide. And remember, I told you this. I don't want to be like, oh, I told you so. But I said this weeks ago. What exactly does reopening the economy even mean? Because an economy, you kind of need, what do they call them? Customers. Well, if millions and millions of people have been laid off, millions more have had their hours cut, millions more getting reduced salary, you're going to reopen economies and what? You're not going to have, in a lot of cases, enough business to warrant to even meet your overhead. Consumers make up the economy. If consumers have only gotten a $1,200 check, which was spent in 10 seconds for most people, if consumers who have lost their job are struggling just to get unemployment, I'm about to show you the 8-hour line from Kentucky. You don't just reopen the economy and magically everything gets put back together. You have 1.5 million more people filing for unemployment. This is the 13th straight week where more than 1 million people have filed for unemployment. Previous record before the pandemic was in 1982. The numbers come as the country's reopening is in nearly full swing in many states. Total number of people receiving benefits edged down slightly to 20.5 million. More than 45 million have filed for unemployment at some point during the pandemic. About 9.2 million people are also receiving unemployment from a new supplemental benefit available to self-employed and gig workers, bringing the total numbers receiving benefits to about 29 million. The number of initial jobless claims has slowed as employers have begun rehiring workers as businesses reopen, and there have been other positive indications. Retail sales spiked 17.7% in May, although they continue to be down nearly 8% since February. So the unemployment rate remains the highest it's been since the Great Depression. The official rate is 13.3%, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics said that it would have been closer to 16.3% if not for an error its workers are making in the data collection. Why that's really troubling is you have the official unemployment number and then the real unemployment number. The last time the real unemployment number was checked, it was closer to 25%. Look at this line. You know, the Democrats were pushing, oh, we get $600 unemployment. Yeah, that's if you could actually get the unemployment. This is Kentucky yesterday. An 8-hour line. 8-hour line. Just to speak with a human being for unemployment. It's an 8-hour line. And by the way, they had to cap the line. It would have been longer, but officials basically said beyond the 8-hour line, yeah, no more people. We're capping the line. So that's just in Kentucky. Here's a little bit more. After not receiving benefits, hundreds flocked to Frankfurt again to resolve unemployment issues. For the second straight day, hundreds descended upon Kentucky's state capitol on Wednesday, hoping to resolve their unemployment claims after weeks or months of not receiving benefits. Unemployment insurance staff unexpectedly set up shop in the Capitol Education Center on Tuesday to help people navigate claims after a small protest popped up nearby. By Tuesday evening, a few hundred people had been seen, with many reporting they should see their long-awaited money by the end of the week. Unemployment staff returned at 9 a.m. Wednesday, and the Office of Unemployment Services later announced it will continue in-person services on Thursday and Friday for those with outstanding claims from March and April. State unemployment offices are not really set up for depressions. They're not really set up for global pandemics. Most of them have old equipment. Most of them, are basically set up for your run-of-the-mill unemployment claims. So when you have 1.5 million a week in the US. You break that down state by state, most of them are overrun. I mean, these numbers are staggering. And this is from Vox. I'm just showing you, like, since the coronavirus became a thing. I mean, look at these lines all over the country. This is for food in Utah. Food in Massachusetts. Volunteers handing out potatoes donated by Washington Potato Farms in Washington State. This is from May. This is cars wait for food assistance in Orlando, Florida, May. A line for lunch at Sharing and Caring in Minneapolis, end of March. People wait for line in Brooklyn, May, for food at a mosque. Food, clothing, and water, Pennsylvania, end of April. Pickup truck waits for food, Utah, end of April. Work furloughs and layoffs are driving thousands in San Francisco for food. Hundreds of cars wait to receive food, Greater Community Bank in Duquesne, Pittsburgh, end of March. I mean, lines and lines and lines, Greater Pittsburgh. It's still going on. People are still waiting for food. People are still waiting for unemployment. And this, millions relying on pandemic aid can see it end, and they're scared. For millions of Americans left out of work by the coronavirus pandemic, government assistance has been a lifeline preventing a plunge into poverty, hunger, and financial ruin. This summer, that lifeline could snap. The $1,200 checks sent to most households are long gone, at least for those who needed them most, with little imminent prospect for a second round. The lending program that helped millions of small businesses keep workers on the payroll will wind down if Congress does not extend it. By the way, I have heard on social media, a lot of people haven't even gotten those $1,200 checks yet. So I think, even though obviously it's very important that these protests have gotten major coverage, I think kind of lost in the protests is the fact that we're kind of living in a quiet, silent depression. What do you call 45 million people filing for unemployment? If you look at the 2008 financial crash, companies learned how to do more with less. They didn't hire back all of the workers laid off when conditions started to get more favorable. We already started to see before coronavirus. Go to your CVS, go to your Target, go to your movie theater, go to, fill in the blank. Self-checkout. Walmart, self-checkout. Many industries removing cashiers, human bodies, with machines and robots. That will continue and be expedited. Businesses that have lost money and possibly manage to come back from this, possibly instead of hiring back all of their workers, are going to try and do more with less, including the things I just described. More automized workers. And part of the problem is cable news and corporate media can't manage to do two things at once. They could only cover one thing at once or two things at once. Now it's, John Bolton and all the salacious details of his book. I don't feel the need to cover it. But how many people, you're talking 1/10 of the country right now, unemployed. That's not even to count how many people have had their hours cut. How many people maybe have been bumped from full-time now to freelance with those hours cut? How many people soon are going to be forced to pay more into their health care if they are lucky enough to still have health care through their employer? Have vacation time cut or other benefits cut? Meanwhile, markets may crash so badly that the Fed has to start buying stocks. The Federal Reserve is buying junk bonds and corporate debt ETFs as part of its campaign to revive the American economy. Next on its shopping list, U.S. stocks, as Scott Minerd, a global chief investment officer at Guggenheim Partners, told CNN Business. The S&P 500 has skyrocketed 40% since March 2nd and 3rd when the Fed announced its unprecedented experiment with junk bonds. That surge, coming in the face of the collapse of the real economy, drove up market valuations to dot-com bubble levels. But Maynard thinks a reckoning is coming, and soon. He expects the S&P 500 will retest its March 23rd low of 2,237 over the next month, potentially crumbling as low as 1,600. That would mark a 49% collapse from where the index traded Tuesday during a strong rally. So in English, folks, the Federal Reserve is going to continue buying up junk stocks so that corporations do not suffer. Not so you don't suffer, but so that corporations do not suffer. You just can't make this stuff up. But in making sure those corporations stay in business and don't suffer, they're not making sure people who work for the corporations keep their jobs. No. The strings were already, the loose strings that were attached to the first corporate bailout. Boeing's starting to lay off people. Airlines are starting to lay off people, even though part of the condition of them getting that money was you cannot lay people off. It's just remarkable. It's truly, truly remarkable what's going on. And by the way, we haven't even gotten to the fact. This isn't even to mention, folks, the moratorium on evictions starts to expire like in 2 days here in New York, possibly in other places too. Look at this. Since a statewide moratorium on evictions was first enacted in March, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has insisted that he, quote, took care of the rent issue. He says that the moratorium solves the problem of renters being unable to stay in their homes in the middle of a pandemic and that the most vulnerable are protected. But that isn't the full picture. Cash-strapped New York tenants are still expected to pay what could end up being months' worth of back rent once the moratorium expires. Despite pressures from tenant advocates and elected officials for greater rent and mortgage relief, the governor has deferred action. During a press briefing on Memorial Day, he maintained that if we're still in this chaos in August, we'll figure it out then. That's cold comfort to some tenants, especially come late June 20th to be specific, 2 months from now, who may slip between the cracks of a porous eviction moratorium. The moratorium is in effect until August 20th, but Lopez, who was mentioned earlier in the story, still may have little choice but to eventually leave her apartment or risk being evicted. She lives in an unregulated unit and, as the recipient of disability benefits, has not lost income as a result of COVID-19. That wouldn't have mattered under Cuomo's initial 90-day moratorium, but when the governor extended the pause with a new executive order in May, it came with significant changes. Chief among them is that as of June 20th, 2 days from now, the moratorium will only apply to tenants who have suffered a, quote, financial hardship because of COVID-19 or who qualify for unemployment. That means people like Lopez, along with undocumented immigrants and many with pending eviction cases, could soon find themselves in court with little recourse to fight an eviction during a public health crisis that has claimed more than 21,000 lives from New York City. And because the language of the governor's order extending the moratorium is vague, it has opened the door for loose interpretation from the court system, leaving more tenants vulnerable to becoming homeless amid the outbreak of an infectious disease. Let me just break that down for you in English, folks. The moratorium is supposed to go till August 20th, but Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York, who the corporate media has elevated to hero levels, he's the new leader of the resistance. A lot of Democrats are still crossing their fingers that he'll be airlifted into the DNC in Milwaukee to replace comatose Joe Biden. Technically, the eviction moratorium begins to get peeled back in 2 days from now. And I've already heard from tenants saying, oh yeah, my landlord has told me you got till Saturday. So landlords are already taking advantage because Cuomo's eviction moratorium, was written purposely vague. So you're going to see, from New York to other areas, people starting to get evicted. And if they're lucky, going to court and successfully getting those evictions stopped. By the way, still during a pandemic. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.